there's a language on the contemporary left about allyship that encourages people to think about themselves as allies, helping others or assisting or standing with others in their struggles. And this language of allyship is coercive, and it's also misleading, and we need to get rid of it. So how is it coercive? It's coercive in that it's like the someone who is supposed to be the ally is somehow understood as separate from a political struggle to which they are allying or which they're allies of, as if this separate struggle is somehow the possession of another group or another person. So, an example is men being allies with women in the women's struggle, or white people being allies with Black people in the struggle for Black liberation. And so there's a very strange kind of separation of struggles, as if it were not in the interest of men and women to favor women's equality, as if it were not in the interest of white and Black people to support Black liberation. So there's the language of allyship makes us start from the beginning from a position of political separateness and a position of political ownership. Like, some people have ownership over a struggle, and then they can be gatekeepers onto whether or not others are allowed into it. This gatekeeping function is actually the kind of quintessential move around allyship. It's like, oh, are you the potential ally? Are you dedicated enough? Are you good enough? Are you sacrificial enough to be part of my or our struggle? So it's like the ally is put from the beginning on their back foot. This is actually a really terrible way to approach organizing. So someone wants to come in to a group or a political space and join the fight. And it's like, well, I don't know. Are you good enough? Are you one of us? Like, have you done your homework? I think you're really sketchy. So there's this gatekeeping aspect to allyship that's politically detrimental, right? It hurts us. It prevents us from building the kinds of solidarity collectives that we need. So it's also like, then this gatekeeping makes the whole discourse of allyship kind of like a sort of a version of neoliberal self-help and a kind of like carceral culture, in that it's like, I'm going to police you. I'm going to police your speech. Have you said the exact right thing? I'm going to police your sources. Have you read the right things? Are you evoking the correct resources when you speak to us? So there's something super policing and super judgmental about this kind of gatekeeping function of allyship. There's also something in this gatekeeping function that's almost like a private property. It's like, we or I have a property in this struggle, and anybody else who comes into it, it's like they have to not just get my permission, but sort of recognize my priority here, recognize that it is really and truly mine. And the weird thing about that is that there's an assumption then of a seamlessness between identity and the politics around it, as if like any woman has claim to a women's struggle, even like, someone like Margaret Thatcher or some kind of, horrible sexist right-wing woman somehow is the gatekeeper for anything around women's struggles. Like, that can't be true. Or if I think in the United States example, and we have a Supreme Court member, Clarence Thomas, who's a Black man, and he's like crazy right wing. And so to think that he would be an arbiter over what counts as, effective struggle for Black liberation, that makes no sense. So there's this seamlessness of identity and politics that underpins the discourse on allyship that's really politically detrimental. It doesn't help left politics. It assumes an identity. It assumes the connection between identity and struggle. It assumes that struggles are something that some groups can own, and it assumes that they begin from positions of separateness, right? That the struggles start out separate rather than being all parts of a common struggle for an emancipatory, egalitarian future. So I think that we need to stop thinking about left politics in terms of allyship, but instead recognize the absolute imperative of comradeship. We need comrades. We need people who recognize ourselves as being on the same side of a political struggle. As comrades, we are all committed to a struggle against colonialism, against imperialism, against racism, against white supremacy, against capitalism, against sexism, against homophobia. It's not the case that some groups own one part of the struggle. It might be the case that some people can speak to it and give insight that others don't have. That's important to recognize. But the language of allyship is not about that. The language of allyship is about policing and separating and claiming ownership. And we have to get rid of that on the left and instead recognize the imperative of building comradely relations between those on the same side of a political struggle. It's not an accident that the language of allyship and the injunction to be a better ally is so common in social media. We're all used to seeing these, right? These things like guides to being a better ally, or real allies make sure that they listen, that they wait till someone else speaks, that they always step back. We're told that real allies, don't ask people to explain their experience, or don't ask people to, tell them about their oppression. Like real allies are told, go find out for yourself. Go do your homework. You go look it up and then come back. I mean, that's like just telling someone to Google it, right? And Google it is not a way to build political education. Telling someone to Google it is just like saying, go be a consumer. Anything that you'll find is as good as any other thing. But when we're in political struggle, what we have to do is connect with one another around shared analyses, around shared understandings, around common approaches to an analysis of how did these forms of oppression intersect and overlap with one another? How do they build off one another? Why is it the case that it's impossible to have real Black liberation under capitalism? Why is that the case? Like, we need to be able to explain that. And that means talking to people not in terms of this kind of allyship, self-help, go find out for yourself, but instead building a common language around a shared tradition and a shared community of struggle. Allyship is like so perfect for social media because it lets people kind of enjoy telling others off. It lets them enjoy performing a kind of superiority or expertise. It lets them enjoy performing politics without actually having to do the hard work of organizing, of going door to door, of working with comrades to come up with a plan, to plan a demo, to actually get involved. This whole language of allyship makes politics something that the individual does inside themselves or on social media. It's like where the political struggle is supposed to be is in yourself. Do you have the right attitude? Have you really thought about your language, right? It's like, look inside yourself first rather than engage in political practice with others. But that's a recipe, honestly, that's a recipe for right-wing empowerment, because it makes the left so utterly divided because people are only thinking about themselves. So allyship works for social media, right? Because it energizes stuff like cancel culture. It energizes the outrage of the everyday while preventing people from building the kinds of trust and connections that we need for organized political revolutionary socialist struggle.